The conference room buzzed with the usual mix of coffee breath and nervous energy. David stood near the back, checking his phone for the third time in 5 minutes. These networking events always made him feel like he was back in high school. Watching everyone else seem to know exactly what they were doing while he just tried to blend in. "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else," a voice said behind him. David turned to find a woman about his age, holding 2 cups of coffee. She had that kind of presence that made you pay attention without trying too hard. Her dark hair was pulled back in a way that looked effortless, but probably took 20 minutes to perfect. She wore a navy blazer that screamed competent professional. But her smile was warm enough to make you forget you were at a work event. "Is it that obvious?" David asked, accepting the coffee she offered. "Only to someone who feels the same way," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Lisa Chen. I work in digital marketing over at Thompson & Associates." David Rodriguez. "I'm with Sterling Communications." He shook her hand, noting her firm grip. "Thanks for the coffee." "You didn't have to do that. I figured we both looked like we needed rescuing from the small talk," Lisa said, gesturing toward the crowd of people exchanging business cards like playing cards. "Plus, I hate drinking alone, even if it's just coffee." They found a quiet corner away from the main crowd. David was surprised at how easy it was to talk to her. She actually listened when he spoke, asking follow-up questions that showed she was paying attention. When he mentioned his work on the recent campaign for a local restaurant chain, she leaned forward with genuine interest. "That's exactly the kind of authentic storytelling that works," she said. "Too many companies try to sound like robots. You made them sound human." David felt a flutter of pride. It had been a while since someone had complimented his work with such enthusiasm. "Thanks. It's nice to meet someone who gets it. Most people in this industry are so focused on metrics they forget there are real people behind the numbers." "Exactly." Lisa's eyes lit up. "I've been working on this project for a nonprofit that helps small businesses. The challenge is making their story compelling without making it sound like a charity case." For the next hour, they talked shop in a way that didn't feel like work. Lisa had insights that David hadn't considered, and she seemed genuinely excited about his ideas. She had this way of building on what he said, making him feel like his thoughts were worth developing further. "You know what?" Lisa said, glancing at her watch. "I have this crazy idea. What if we collaborated on something? I mean, your storytelling approach and my digital strategy background could be a really powerful combination." David felt his chest tighten slightly. The conversation had been going so well, but now it felt like it was shifting into territory he wasn't ready for. "That sounds interesting," he said carefully. "I'm serious," Lisa continued, her enthusiasm growing. "I've been looking for someone who understands brand narrative the way you do. We could pitch it as a joint presentation to some of my clients. Maybe even turn it into a workshop series." The idea actually did sound appealing. David had been thinking about expanding his skill set, and Lisa clearly knew her stuff, but something held him back. Maybe it was the way she'd moved just a little closer during their conversation, or how she touched his arm when she laughed at his jokes. He couldn't shake the feeling that she might be interested in more than just professional collaboration. "I appreciate the offer," David said, "but I'm trying to keep things pretty focused right now. Work stuff, I mean. I just went through a divorce a few months ago, and I'm still getting my feet under me." He immediately regretted sharing that personal detail. Why had he told her about his divorce? They just met, but something about Lisa made him want to be honest instead of the awkward sympathy he expected. Lisa's expression softened with understanding. "I get it. Big life changes can make everything feel uncertain, but this would be purely professional. I'm not talking about anything complicated." "I know, and I appreciate that. It's just that right now I'm trying to keep work relationships at work, if that makes sense." Lisa nodded, but David noticed her smile change slightly. It wasn't disappointed or embarrassed like he'd expected. Instead, it was almost amused, like she found his caution entertaining rather than reasonable. "I totally respect that," she said, reaching into her purse. "But in case you change your mind, here's my card." No pressure at all. She handed him a sleek black business card with silver lettering. Her contact information was minimal but elegant. David took it, though he wasn't sure why. "Thanks," he said. "I'll think about it. Take all the time you need," Lisa said. That smile was still there, the one that made him feel like she was enjoying a private joke. "I'm a patient person. Good things are worth waiting for." Something about the way she said it made David's stomach flip. Not in a good way. It was the kind of comment that could be perfectly innocent or loaded with meaning, depending on how you heard it. The conference was winding down around them. People were starting to pack up their materials and head for the exits. David realized he'd been talking to Lisa for almost the entire event. "Well, I should probably head out," he said, pocketing her card. "Thanks for the coffee and the conversation. It was nice meeting you." "Likewise," Lisa said, gathering her things. "I hope to hear from you soon." As David walked to his car, he couldn't shake the feeling that something about their interaction had been off. Lisa was clearly intelligent and successful, and she'd been nothing but professional. So why did he feel like he'd just walked through a minefield? He thought about her smile again, the way it had lingered just a moment too long when he declined her collaboration offer. Most people would have looked disappointed, or maybe a little embarrassed, but Lisa had looked almost pleased, like his rejection had been exactly what she'd expected, or maybe even hoped for. David shook his head as he unlocked his car. He was probably overthinking it. The divorce had left him second-guessing every interaction with women, reading meanings into things that probably weren't there. Lisa seemed nice enough, and her business proposal had actually sounded legitimate, but as he drove home, he couldn't stop thinking about that smile, and for some reason, that worried him more than it should have. 3 weeks had passed since the conference, and David was starting to feel like he was losing his mind. It started small, so small that he almost dismissed it as coincidence. But after the 4th time, he couldn't ignore it anymore. The first time was at his gym. David had been going to the same fitness center for 2 years, always at 6 in the morning before work. He knew the regulars by sight, if not by name. The guy who always wore the same faded Lakers shirt, the woman who spent 40 minutes on the elliptical while reading romance novels, the trainer who drank protein shakes that looked like chocolate milk. So when he saw Lisa on the treadmill, he did a double take. She was wearing expensive workout gear and running at a steady pace, looking like she belonged there. When she noticed him, she waved cheerfully and kept running. Small world. She said later as they were both leaving, "I just joined last week. My old gym closed down, and this place got great reviews online. It made perfect sense." David lived in a popular neighborhood, and his gym was well regarded. Plenty of people from the business district worked out there. He smiled and made small talk about the facilities before heading to his car. The second time was at his coffee shop. David had a routine he'd developed after his divorce. Every Tuesday and Thursday, he'd stop at this little place called Blue Moon Cafe on his way to work. They knew his order by heart, and the barista would start making his drink the moment she saw him walk in. Lisa was sitting at his usual table by the window, laptop open, looking very much like she belonged there. She looked up when he walked in, her face lighting up with recognition. "David, what a surprise," she said, gesturing to the empty chair across from her. "Want to sit?" "I'm just catching up on some emails." He hesitated, then sat down. The cafe was crowded, and it would have been rude to refuse. They talked for a few minutes about work, the weather, the quality of the coffee. Lisa mentioned she'd discovered the place recently and loved the atmosphere. "It's perfect for getting work done," she said, "quiet enough to think, but not so quiet you feel isolated." David agreed, though he noticed she hadn't actually done any work on her laptop the whole time they'd talked. When he excused himself to head to the office, she stayed behind, supposedly to finish her emails. The third time was at the grocery store. David did his shopping on Sunday mornings, usually around 10. He had his route down to a science, starting with produce and working his way through the aisles systematically. He was in the cereal aisle, debating between 2 brands of oatmeal, when he heard her voice behind him. I recommend the steel-cut oats, Lisa said, appearing beside him with a shopping basket. Takes longer to cook, but it's worth it for the texture. This time, David felt a small chill. 3 coincidences in 3 weeks seemed like a lot, especially since Lisa had never mentioned living in his neighborhood. But when he casually asked, she had a reasonable explanation. I moved here last month, she said. I'm subletting a place on Oak Street while I look for something more permanent. This is the closest store to my apartment. Oak Street was only 4 blocks from David's building. It was entirely plausible that they'd shop at the same store. Still, as they walked through the produce section together, David found himself paying attention to what Lisa put in her basket: organic vegetables, expensive cheese, the kind of wine that cost more than $20 a bottle. She shopped like someone who had just moved and was still figuring out her preferences. By the time David got home, he convinced himself he was being paranoid. The city wasn't that big, and their professional worlds overlapped, running into each other occasionally was bound to happen. But then came the phone call. David, I hope you don't mind me calling. Lisa's voice was warm and professional. I got your number from the conference directory. I wanted to follow up on that collaboration idea we discussed. David's first instinct was to say no again, but Lisa was persistent in a way that didn't feel pushy. She put together a proposal. She said, nothing formal, just some ideas about how they could work together on a project for one of her clients. It's a small nonprofit that helps veterans start their own businesses, she explained. They need someone who can tell their story in a way that connects with people. I immediately thought of you. The cause was something David cared about. His grandfather had been a veteran, and he'd always wanted to do work that felt meaningful. Against his better judgment, he agreed to meet with her to discuss the project. They met at a coffee shop downtown, different from the one where they'd run into each other. Lisa had done her homework. She had a folder full of research about the nonprofit, sample campaigns from similar organizations, and a clear vision for how they could help. The challenge is making their story compelling without making it sound like a charity case, she said, echoing almost exactly what she'd said at the conference. These are successful business owners who happen to be veterans. The military connection is part of their story, but it's not the whole story. David found himself getting excited about the project. Despite his reservations, Lisa's ideas were good, and she clearly understood the client's needs. Maybe he'd been wrong to be so cautious. This could actually work, he said, looking over her notes. When would you need to present it? End of next month, Lisa said, which gives us plenty of time to put together something really strong. As they talked through the details, David noticed Lisa steering the conversation toward more personal topics. She asked about his background, his family, his interests outside of work. When he mentioned his divorce, she was sympathetic without being intrusive. Divorce is never easy, she said, but sometimes it's necessary for personal growth. I went through something similar a few years ago. She shared just enough about her own experience to make David feel like they were connecting on a deeper level. By the time they finished their coffee, he felt like he made a new friend, not just a professional contact. I'm really glad we're doing this, Lisa said as they gathered their things. I think we're going to work well together. David agreed, though something nagged at him. As they walked to their cars, Lisa asked about his weekend plans, his favorite restaurants, his thoughts on the neighborhood where he lived. The questions felt natural in the context of their conversation, but later, driving home, David realized how much personal information he'd shared. He also realized that while Lisa had been asking plenty of questions, she hadn't revealed much about herself. He knew she'd been divorced, that she'd recently moved, and that she liked expensive coffee. But beyond that, she remained something of a mystery. That night, David found himself wondering if he'd made the right decision. The project was legitimate, and Lisa seemed professional. But something about the timing of their meeting felt too convenient. 3 coincidental encounters followed by a phone call about a project that perfectly matched his interests. Maybe he was overthinking it. Maybe Lisa was just being friendly and professional. But as he fell asleep, David couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just agreed to something he might regret. David stared at the small package sitting on his doorstep, confusion mixing with unease. There was no return address, just his name written in neat handwriting on brown paper. Inside was a bag of his favorite coffee beans, the expensive ones. He only bought for special occasions. A small note was attached. Saw these and thought of you. Hope your week is going well. Lisa. He looked around the hallway of his apartment building, as if Lisa might be hiding behind one of the doors. How did she know where he lived? More importantly, how did she know his exact coffee preference? He never mentioned the specific brand to her, and it wasn't something you could guess. David set the package on his kitchen counter and tried to push down the uncomfortable feeling in his chest. Maybe she'd asked around at work. Maybe it was just a lucky guess. But as he made himself dinner, his eyes kept drifting back to the coffee beans, and that feeling wouldn't go away. The next morning brought another surprise. A book was waiting by his car in the parking garage, wrapped in the same brown paper. This time it was a novel he mentioned wanting to read during one of their conversations. The note read, "Found this at a bookstore and remembered you mentioning it. Enjoy." Lisa. David looked around the parking garage, noting the security cameras in the corners. Someone would have had to follow him here to know which car was his. The building had decent security, but it wasn't impossible for someone to get in if they really wanted to dot at work. David tried to focus on his projects, but his mind kept wandering. When his colleague Jake stopped by his desk, David found himself asking a question he'd been avoiding. "Hey, do you know much about Lisa Chen? She works at Thompson and Associates." Jake's face lit up. "Oh yeah, Lisa's great. She just started that wellness program for employees. Really smart, super organized. Why do you ask?" "We're working on a project together," David said. "Just wanted to make sure she's reliable." "Definitely," Jake said. "She's one of those people who really cares about others, you know? Always checking in on people, remembering little details. I think she's exactly what this industry needs." David nodded, though Jake's description made him more uncomfortable, not less. Remembering little details was one thing. Knowing where he lived and what coffee he preferred was something else entirely. That afternoon, Lisa called about their project. Her voice was warm and professional, as always. "I hope you don't mind the small gifts," she said when David brought them up. "I saw them and thought of you. I know some people find it weird, but I like doing nice things for people I'm working with." "It's thoughtful," David said carefully, "but you didn't need to do that. And I'm curious how you knew where I live." "Oh, I hope that wasn't too forward," Lisa said, sounding genuinely concerned. "I was in your neighborhood visiting a friend, and I saw you coming out of your building. I thought it would be nice to surprise you." The explanation was reasonable, but something about it felt rehearsed. David had lived in his building for 3 years and had never seen Lisa in the area before the recent encounters. "Which friend?" David asked, trying to keep his voice casual. There was a slight pause before Lisa answered. "Jennifer Walsh. She lives on Oak Street. We went to college together." David didn't know anyone named Jennifer Walsh, but Oak Street was only a few blocks away. It was possible. Everything Lisa said was always possible. Always reasonable. That was what made it so unsettling. Over the next week, the gifts continued. Flowers appeared on his desk at work with a note saying they were to brighten his day. A sandwich from his favorite deli was delivered to his office during lunch. Each gift came with a sweet note, and each one showed knowledge of his preferences that felt too intimate for someone he'd only recently met. David's co-workers noticed the attention. "Someone's got a secret admirer," his desk neighbor Rachel teased. When the flowers arrived, "They're beautiful." "Who's the lucky lady?" "Just a colleague," David said. But he could see the knowing look in Rachel's eyes. The breaking point came on a Friday evening. David had been working late, trying to catch up on projects he'd been neglecting. The office was mostly empty, just a few people scattered across different floors. He was gathering his things to leave when he heard footsteps in the hallway. Lisa appeared in his doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee from the shop downstairs. "I saw your light was still on," she said, stepping into his office. "Thought you might need some caffeine." David's heart started beating faster. How did you know I was here? I was working late too, Lisa said, settling into the chair across from his desk. I saw you hadn't left yet when I went to get coffee. But David hadn't seen Lisa's car in the parking garage. He hadn't seen her in the elevator or the hallway. The building was small enough that he would have noticed if she'd been there all evening. What floor are you on? He asked. Third, Lisa said without hesitation. Conference room 3B. We've been using it for our wellness program meetings. David knew the third floor well. Conference room 3B was directly above his office, and he would have heard people moving around up there. The building was old, and sound traveled easily between floors. Lisa, David said, his voice more serious than he intended. I appreciate all the gifts and the thoughtfulness, but I think we should keep our relationship strictly professional. For a moment, Lisa's expression didn't change. Then, slowly, that same smile spread across her face, the one that had bothered him at the conference. It wasn't disappointed or embarrassed. It was amused, almost pleased. Of course, she said. I completely understand. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. But her tone didn't match her words. She sounded like she was humoring him, like his discomfort was something cute rather than something to be respected. I think maybe we should put the project on hold, David said, though it pained him to say it. The work was good, and the nonprofit really did need help. That's unfortunate, Lisa said, standing up. But I respect your decision. Though I have to say, David, your boundaries are really quite attractive. Most people are so eager to please. The comment sent a chill down David's spine. It was the kind of thing that could be innocent flirtation or something much more concerning. Depending on the context, given everything that had happened, David was leaning toward the latter. I should get going, he said, reaching for his jacket. Of course, Lisa said, heading for the door. Have a good weekend, David. I hope you get some rest. As she walked away, David could swear he heard her humming. He waited until he was sure she was gone before leaving his office, and he took the stairs instead of the elevator, just to avoid any chance of running into her again. That night, David couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Lisa's reaction, the way she'd seemed almost energized by his rejection. Most people would have been embarrassed or disappointed, but Lisa had looked like she was enjoying herself, like his discomfort was exactly what she'd been hoping for. He found himself checking the locks on his door twice before bed, and when he finally fell asleep, he dreamed about brown paper packages and that unsettling smile. David spent his weekend researching Lisa Chen, and what he found made his stomach turn. It took some digging, but he finally located information about her previous job at a marketing firm in Seattle. The company's employee directory still showed her picture, but when he called the main number and asked to speak with her, the receptionist's voice became careful and professional. Ms. Chen is no longer with the company, she said. Can I direct your call to someone else? David explained that he was considering working with Lisa on a project and wanted to check her references. There was a long pause before the receptionist transferred him to the HR department. I'm sorry, but we don't provide detailed references. Over the phone, the HR representative said, I can only confirm that Lisa Chen worked here from March 2022 to September 2023. But David was persistent. He explained that he was concerned about some unprofessional behavior and needed to know if there had been any issues. After several minutes of back and forth, the HR representative finally gave him a name. You might want to speak with Kevin Torres, she said quietly. He's no longer with the company, but he worked closely with Ms. Chen. I can't give you his contact information, but he's now at Phillips Marketing Group. David found Kevin's number online and called him that evening. Kevin was hesitant at first, but when David described his situation, Kevin's tone changed completely. Oh man, Kevin said, I was hoping I'd never have to talk about this again. What's she doing to you? I'm not sure yet, David said, but I think she's been following me, sending gifts to my apartment. She seems to know things about me that I never told her. Kevin was quiet for a long moment. Yeah, that sounds familiar. Look, I can't get into all the details because of legal reasons. But Lisa developed what my lawyer called an unhealthy fixation on me. It started with work collaboration, just like you're describing. What happened? She started showing up everywhere I went, coffee shops, restaurants, even my gym. She'd always have some excuse about why she was there. Then came the gifts, the late-night calls, the way she'd insert herself into conversations with my friends and coworkers. David's heart was pounding. How long did it go on? About 6 months. I tried to handle it professionally at first, but she escalated everything. She'd send flowers to my desk, leave notes on my car, even started following me on dates. When I finally complained to HR, she accused me of harassment. What do you mean? She claimed I had been pursuing her and that she was just trying to be polite. She had edited text messages, emails taken out of context, even photos that made it look like we were closer than we actually were. She was very good at making herself look like the victim. David felt sick. What did you do? I got a lawyer. Turns out she'd done this before at another job. The pattern was always the same. Pick a target, establish a professional relationship, then escalate until the person complained. Then she'd flip it and claim harassment. Is that why she left Seattle? My lawyer made it very clear that she needed to find another job. Kevin said, but David, listen to me carefully. This woman is not going to stop just because you ask her to. She sees rejection as a challenge, not a boundary. You need to document everything and get help now, before it gets worse. David thanked Kevin and hung up, his hands shaking. He spent the rest of the night writing down every interaction he'd had with Lisa, every gift, every coincidental meeting. The pattern was clear now, and it was terrifying. On Monday morning, David went straight to HR. The woman who met with him, Patricia Williams, listened politely as he explained his concerns. She took notes and asked a few questions, but David could see the skepticism in her eyes. Mr. Rodriguez, I understand your concerns, but I have to tell you that Lisa Chen has been nothing but professional since she started working with us. She's actually been commended for her employee wellness initiative. I'm not questioning her work performance, David said. I'm telling you that she's been following me, sending gifts to my apartment, and showing up at places where I go regularly. Patricia flipped through her notes. Has she ever threatened you? Has she done anything that could be considered harassment in a legal sense? She's been watching me, learning my routines, showing up where I work late at night. But has she threatened you? Patricia repeated. Has she done anything that would violate company policy? David realized how his complaints must sound. Lisa had been careful to stay just within the bounds of what could be considered normal behavior. The gifts could be seen as friendly gestures. The coincidental meetings could be explained away. Her late-night visit to his office could be described as collegial support. I spoke with someone from her previous job, David said. She did the same thing there. There's a pattern. Patricia's expression became more serious. Mr. Rodriguez, I need to be very clear about something. Making accusations about an employee's past behavior, especially if you can't substantiate them, could be considered defamation. I strongly advise you to focus on specific incidents that have occurred here. David left the meeting feeling defeated. He'd expected HR to take his concerns seriously, but instead he felt like he was being treated as a potential problem. Patricia had promised to look into it, but her tone suggested she thought David was overreacting. That evening, David called his ex-wife, Elena. They maintained a friendly relationship after their divorce, and she'd always been a good listen. But when he explained what was happening, her response surprised him. David, I have to ask this, and please don't take it the wrong way, but are you sure you're not misreading the situation? What do you mean? You've been pretty isolated since our divorce. Maybe this woman is just being friendly, and you're interpreting it as something more threatening because you're not used to female attention. David felt a surge of frustration. Elena, she's been following me. She knows where I live, where I work out, what coffee I drink. That's not normal friendliness. But did you tell her those things? Maybe you mentioned more than you remember? I didn't tell her my apartment address. Maybe she looked it up online. David, I'm not trying to dismiss your concerns, but from what you're describing, it sounds like she might just be interested in you romantically and doesn't know how to express it appropriately. After they hung up, David sat in his apartment, feeling more alone than ever. The two people he'd trusted to help him had both suggested he was overreacting. Maybe they were right. Maybe he was being paranoid. But then he remembered Kevin's words. She sees rejection as a challenge, not a boundary. That night, David couldn't concentrate on anything. He kept checking his phone, looking out his window, listening for sounds in the hallway. Around midnight, he heard footsteps outside his door. They stopped right in front of his apartment, and David held his breath. A small piece of paper slid under his door. David waited several minutes before picking it up. It was a note in Lisa's handwriting. I hope you're sleeping well. Sweet dreams. Elsie had been outside his door at midnight, close enough to slide a note under it. David's hands were shaking as he called building security. But by the time the guard checked the hallway, Lisa was gone. The security guard was sympathetic but unhelpful. The cameras in the hallway have been acting up lately, he said. I can file a report, but without video evidence, there's not much we can do. David spent the rest of the night sitting in his living room chair, watching the door. He'd reached a decision. If no one else was going to take this seriously, he'd have to protect himself. The next morning, he ordered a small security camera for his apartment door. If Lisa wanted to play games, he'd make sure he had evidence of every move she made. The security camera David installed caught Lisa on video 3 times in the first week. Each time, she'd approach his door quietly, leave something small like a note or a flower, then disappear back down the hallway. The timestamps showed she was coming by at different hours, sometimes as late as 2 a.m. David took the footage to the police station downtown, carrying a folder full of documentation he'd been building. The officer who met with him, Detective Richards, was professional but direct. Mr. Rodriguez, I can see why you're concerned, she said, reviewing the videos on David's phone. But legally, this is a gray area. She's not threatening you, and technically she's not trespassing since your building hallway is accessible to visitors. But she's clearly watching me, learning my schedule. I understand. And I'm not dismissing your concerns. But for us to take action, we need evidence of criminal behavior. Has she damaged your property? Has she threatened you in any way? David showed her the gifts, the notes, the pattern of behavior. Detective Richards listened carefully and took notes, but David could see the same skepticism he'd encountered with HR. My advice is to document everything and avoid contact with her completely. If she escalates to threatening behavior or actual harassment, come back immediately. In the meantime, you might want to consider speaking with a lawyer about your options. David left the police station feeling more frustrated than ever. It seemed like Lisa had designed her behavior perfectly to stay just within legal boundaries, while making his life miserable. That afternoon, David decided to take matters into his own hands. He'd been careful to avoid Lisa at work, but he needed to confront her directly. He found her in the break room, making coffee with that same calm, professional demeanor she always maintained. Lisa, we need to talk. She looked up with a bright smile. David, I was just thinking about you. How are you doing? I know what you're doing, David said, keeping his voice low. I know about Kevin Torres in Seattle. I know about the pattern. For just a moment, Lisa's expression flickered. The smile didn't disappear, but something changed behind her eyes. Then she recovered, tilting her head with apparent confusion. I'm sorry, David. I don't know what you're talking about. Kevin Torres? I don't know anyone by that name. You worked with him at your previous job. He told me about the gifts, the following, the way you made his life hell for 6 months. Lisa's smile widened, and David felt a chill run down his spine. It was the same smile from the conference, but now it looked different. Predatory. David, I think you might be confused. I've never worked with anyone named Kevin Torres. Are you feeling all right? You seem a little paranoid. I have video of you outside my apartment, David said, multiple times. Late at night, video of me? Lisa laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. David, I think you're having some kind of breakdown. Maybe you should talk to someone about these fantasies you're having." The way she said fantasies made David's stomach turn. She was gaslighting him, making him question his own sanity even when he had proof. "Stay away from me," David said. "Stay away from my apartment, my gym, my coffee shop. Stay away from everywhere I go." Lisa's expression became serious, almost concerned. "David, I'm worried about you. You're accusing me of things I haven't done, and now you're being hostile." "Maybe I should talk to HR about this." "Go ahead," David said. "I've already documented everything." "Documented what?" "Your paranoid delusions." Lisa's voice had taken on a mocking tone. "David, no one is going to believe that I'm some kind of stalker. Look at me. Look at my reputation here. Then look at yourself. You're divorced, isolated, clearly struggling with some kind of mental health issue." David felt like he'd been punched. Lisa was right about one thing: to outside observers, he probably did look like he was having problems. A recently divorced man, working too much, becoming paranoid about a friendly female colleague. "I'm warning you," David said. "Leave me alone." Lisa stepped closer, and David could smell her perfume. "Or what, David? What are you going to do? Call the police? They'll think you're crazy. Call HR. They already think you're the problem. Face it, David, no one is going to believe you." That night, David couldn't sleep. Lisa's words echoed in his head, and he found himself second-guessing everything. Maybe he was overreacting. Maybe the stress of the divorce and work had made him paranoid. Maybe Lisa really was just being friendly, and he misinterpreted everything. But then he remembered the video footage. Whatever else was happening, Lisa had been outside his door at 2 a.m. That wasn't normal behavior. No matter how you interpreted it, around 3 a.m., David heard his phone buzz. It was a text from an unknown number. "Can't sleep either. I know how you feel. Sometimes I lie awake thinking about you too." David's blood ran cold. He'd never given Lisa his personal phone number. He'd been careful to only communicate through work channels. But somehow, she'd gotten it. He screenshot the message and added it to his growing file of evidence. Then he blocked the number, though he suspected it wouldn't matter. If Lisa wanted to contact him, she'd find a way. The next morning brought a new horror. David woke up to find his car had been vandalized. Someone had scratched paranoid into the paint on the driver's side door. The scratches were deep and would cost hundreds of dollars to repair. David called the police. But without witnesses or security cameras in the parking garage, there was nothing they could do. He knew it was Lisa, but he couldn't prove it. She'd been careful to make it look like random vandalism at work. David tried to focus on his projects, but concentration was impossible. Every time he heard footsteps in the hallway, he tensed up. Every time his phone buzzed, he felt sick. Around lunchtime, Jake stopped by his desk with a concerned expression. "Hey, David, I heard there was some kind of incident with you and Lisa Chen. Are you okay?" David's heart sank. "What kind of incident? I don't know the details." But Lisa seemed really upset. She said you'd been acting strange, making her uncomfortable. She was worried about you. Of course, Lisa was getting ahead of the story, positioning herself as the victim before David could establish his side of events. It was exactly what Kevin had warned him about. "Jake, I need you to listen to me carefully." David said, "Lisa has been following me, sending gifts to my apartment, showing up everywhere I go. She's done this before at other jobs." Jake's expression was sympathetic but skeptical. "David, I know the divorce was hard on you, but Lisa's a good person. She's been nothing but professional since she started here. Are you sure you're not misreading the situation?" It was the same response David had gotten from everyone. Lisa had cultivated such a perfect professional image that no one would believe she was capable of the behavior David was describing. That evening, David made a decision. He was going to set up a trap. If Lisa was watching him as closely as he suspected, she'd know his routines. He'd use that against her. David started working late every night, staying in his office until well past normal hours. He set up a small camera in his office, positioned to catch anyone who might enter. If Lisa was as obsessed with him as he believed, She wouldn't be able to resist the opportunity to go through his things. When she thought he wasn't around, on the third night, his patience paid off. The camera caught Lisa entering his office at 11 p.m. using what appeared to be a master key. She spent 20 minutes going through his desk, his computer, his personal belongings. The footage was clear and undeniable, but what David saw next made his blood run cold. Lisa looked directly at the camera, smiled that terrible smile, and mouthed the words, "I know you're watching." She'd known about the camera all along. She wanted to be caught. David realized with growing horror that Lisa wasn't just following him. She was toying with him, playing a game where she held all the advantages, every move he made. She'd anticipated every boundary he tried to set. She'd found a way around. As Lisa left his office, she blew a kiss at the camera. David understood. Now that this wasn't going to end with warnings or documentation or police reports. Lisa was enjoying this too much to stop. The game was far from over, and David was beginning to understand that he'd been playing by the wrong rules from the very beginning.